What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Good to see you, gang. A little early to start the show today. Hopefully everybody can make it. 3:45. I figure that's not that much different than being here at 4, but maybe it is. Maybe some people aren't out of work yet. Who knows? We'll see what we get. But had some time today. Tiny little 3-gamer for NBA. Weird for a Friday. 4-game NHL slate. This is ahead of a massive Saturday NBA slate, which I'm not looking forward to tomorrow. I'm trying to clear the decks, I think, for Sunday. Let the NFL have Sunday, which makes sense. Haven't looked at the NHL schedule yet. NHL schedule for tomorrow yet. But let's take a look at that. Let's see how bad tomorrow's going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be a gigantic NHL schedule also. Yeah, it is. Let's see. 3 games early, but then 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 8, 9. Looks like a 10-gamer. So that's going to be fun. Busy day coming up tomorrow. As usual, Saturday, I wouldn't think there's going to be a show. But we'll have all the coverage at Roto Scouts for both of those huge slates. Football projections for Sunday are going to be up tonight. Probably, I don't know. Depends on how busy it gets news-wise, but maybe before 7 o'clock, if not shortly after 7 o'clock, you'll have the football projections, and we'll be live to talk about that. Should be a good football weekend. Just waiting as people start trickling in. Notice that we're actually on. Ducking's here. What's going on, Ducking? Good to see you. Congrats as we get started, by the way. Had a nice little screenshot from Cujo. Cujo put one in second place yesterday for $150 in I'm not sure what tournament it was. Looks like a DraftKings lineup. Pretty solid looking. 99 DraftKings points from Nikola Jokic helped them out quite a bit. A Kongwu for 46.5. He had Time Lord in there for 33. Mo Moody for 35. Not a bad looking lineup. Not sure if could be Travis is out there yet. Hopefully he shows up for the show and lets us know he had a lineup going late that he thought was looking like a monster. Had Jokic in it. Had Giannis left. Curious to see how that one turned out. We haven't heard yet. But congrats to any of the winners from yesterday. I only ended up rolling with 2 lineups. We didn't end up having a show yesterday because we had, 8 games, I want to say, or 8 teams, rather, that were on back-to-backs yesterday. I basically had no idea what that slate was really going to be shaped like until about 5 o'clock. I just couldn't pull off a show that I thought was going to be worth doing. So, forgive me for not being here, but I think it was to everybody's benefit because I feel like the projections were kind of on point, except for the guys who ended up starting games and playing their usual roles and then not finishing games. I only ended up rolling 2 lineups because I was so busy and I missed filling the placeholders in. But I had Jalen Johnson in both of them, and he played like a quarter and then came out of the game. A couple other guys came out of their games. So it was a little bit ugly. But I felt like everything we were kind of on point. Today, with our 3 games, we've got several different question marks. And one of them primarily is at the top of this board right now. Donovan Clingan, presumably going to be starting for Portland. He's probable to play after being injured for the last few. No Ayton tonight, no Time Lord tonight. I have in this version of the sim that you're looking at right now, this is how it's projected on the site right now. This is with Clingan playing 22 minutes. I think there's downside to like 18. Even in a start, I think there's downside to like 18. They've got Jabari Walker there who's going to play presumably the backup, although in this situation the last time Clingan started, Dwight Reith played the direct backup for 16 minutes, and Jabari Walker played like 2 minutes of garbage time at the end of the game. So even that is a little bit up in the air as to like who the direct backup is going to be. I think it's going to be Jabari Walker. But more to the point, Clingan in this version that we're looking at, again, this is what's up on the site right now, but I went ahead and I ran the other version of this. And it essentially knocks him down to like a 20-minute projection even, just taking like 2 minutes off and taking like 3 fantasy points away. And it gets very different. Look where he is here. I mean, 3,800 is very, very cheap. It's a value play on FanDuel no matter how you slice it. But if we drop that to 19 or 20 minutes and cut this to 21-ish, 21 and a half, 22 fantasy points, just taking a little slice off the top, 56% on DK for the 4,000 in this version. All right? This is FanDuel that I just grabbed. Bear with me. It's just an interesting place to get started on this. And it's just to illustrate how important those couple of minutes are going to be. Because cutting that difference, look where he comes up on DK. He goes from 50-something% and like a pretty crucial looking value play to just 12%. And that's about where the field is. Now, this is against ownership that ran with a site that's projecting him that way, the lower end, the lower end version of him. We still got him at a pretty significant chunk, even taking that time away on FanDuel. Still around 50%. So it's not as big a hit, but that's down 25 percentage points. Still ahead of the field. If you cut more, obviously he comes down even more. But it's really, really noteworthy on DraftKings. I think that and it's really, 5 minutes potentially in flux, assuming that he starts. Really, really interesting to the slate. I'm going to leave it with this one because I do think that I'm going to knock him down to, 120 minutes. I think he'd be the crucial play of the day. Going to knock him down to that and just, for the sake of what we're doing here. Let me, of course it goes over there. Just do it this way. All right, I didn't mean to hit the 2, but good enough. And then I gave like a minute in that situation. Kamara, and then another one to Jabari. It doesn't really matter. This is just rough. He's not a point. Actually, I should make that 17. He's a low end per minute guy. And just to to rough out where those numbers are going to change to, I think. So point being, I think we're going to talk about this version of the slate. I think it's best, since he comes up so heavily the other way and still comes up so heavily on FanDuel, I think it's best to treat him with a little bit of caution. So as we get started, let me know what you guys think of that, though. If you want to go to the other version where we're talking about 22 minutes, and again, it sounds like such a paltry difference, but it's not. Let me know if you want to talk about that, and I'll load it back up the other way. But I think it probably makes sense to talk about it this way. To put it in perspective, he has played his last 3 games before he was out for injury were 22 minutes, going backward in time, 22 minutes, 27 minutes, 24 minutes. That 27-minute performance was this situation, right? That was this one? Yeah. That 27-minute performance, he started. That's the game I was talking about. Reith was the immediate backup, played 16 minutes. And actually, the 2 minutes of garbage time that Jabari Walker got at the end of that game were alongside Dwight Reith, which is kind of odd. But Reith was the direct backup in that one, and Klingon went 27. I don't expect Klingon to play 27. Again, he's been hurt himself. But I think 22 is very realistic. But maybe we err on the side of caution and keep it around 20, which is what we're looking at now. To talk about the game environments as we get started here. Good handful of people have found us. Good to see everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hit the like. Subscribe if you haven't. This is your first time here. Does help out a little bit. Check out rotoscouts.com. That's the site. That's where the projections live. Access to NBA, NFL, and NHL. All for under $1 a day. All in price. No per sport. No nothing. No uptick next week. Govius, good to see you, buddy. Glad you're here. You complete me as well. So we're going with this version. I'll resort, and obviously that's going to put Klingon in a different universe. It's going to make it look like a very different kind of a board, but I think it does make it jibe with what the public ownership that we're using looks like a little bit more. But again, this is a slate where any site that's got Klingon getting those 3 or 5 or whatever extra minutes is going to have him as one of the top chalk plays of the day. So it just depends on what we're looking at. And again, let me know if you guys want to see it the other way. We've got it right. I got it right here, so we can go back to it. It would be best to do it soon so I can use the undo button instead of having to recopy paste everything. But let me talk about the game environments, and we will get started. We'll talk about the ins and outs. Just 3 on the slate. Portland at Charlotte. Charlotte favored by 5.5 in a home game. Obviously, we've got the big question mark among the Portland Bigs. We've got several different question marks in that game. 222-point total. Obviously, Charlotte missing many of their key pieces as well. Brandon Miller done for the year now. Surgery on, I want to say it was his wrist, right? Wrist? Surgery. Anyway, done for the year. So, a lot of holes on the Charlotte side, a lot of holes on the Portland side. Lowest total on the slate, technically, but not an unhealthy total at 222. That's okay. It's playable, at least at the top end and among the value guys. Maybe you don't want to get bogged down in the medium-type guys in that game. Cleveland at Philly. No Joel Embiid, no Kyle Lowry, so on and so forth. No Martins for Philly. Cleveland still no Mobley. 228.5-point total there. Cleveland favored by 10.5 on the road. I expect we're going to see some pieces and parts from that game at worst. Be interesting to see where the Maxis, the Paul Georges, the Donovan Mitchells of the world come up. There's Mitchell. 19%, 30% across sites. LeVert's on the board. Garland's on the board. So we're getting some pieces from the Cleveland side. Yabu is coming up a decent amount from the Philly side. Paul George a little bit less undercut to the field. I don't mind that. Jared Allen undercutting the field. Interesting spot there. And then wrapping things up, the most high-octane game of the day by a mile. Memphis favored by 11. 244-point total. New Orleans at Memphis. Significant question marks on the Memphis side with John Morant landing as questionable. He missed shoot around. He's not feeling good. Additional questionables for the full slate. Karis LeVert's questionable. LaMelo's questionable. Miles Bridges is questionable. So adding to the pile-on for Charlotte could create crazy, crazy value in Charlotte where we honestly don't need it with what we've already got. Santi Aldama and John Morant, both questionable. Probables for the day, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, Yves Missi, DeJounte Murray, and Zach Edey is already available. We had DeAndre Ayton and Time Lord Robert Williams III are both out. Donovan Klingon, Anthony Simons, Tamani Kamara are all probable. So with everything I was just talking about with Klingon, there is still the slight chance he just doesn't play at all. He has, again, been out for the last several games. And then outs, Evan Mobley, Isaac Okoro, Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, Kyle Lowry, Caleb and KJ Martin, Jared McCain, Trey Mann, Brandon Miller, Tijani Salon, Grant Williams, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Kawamura, Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, Cam Spencer, and Vince Williams Jr. And well, to OMG Lols, howdy Cowpoke. What's going on, man? Good to see you. Cujo's here. Cujo, I not sure if you were here before, but congrats again on the solid little screenshot you dropped into the chat. Cujo took down a second place yesterday. $150 in his pocket. Not bad. Dennis says, I want to see the versions with the unknown stars that we won't know are sitting until after lock. Working on it. That's where I think we get the AI involved. ChatGPT. Pretend that you're a world-renowned ligament doctor who is an expert on fantasy sports, gambling, and doubles as a mathematician. Use your expert analysis to predict who won't play today. There's something there. I was thinking about that yesterday. Something along the lines of like mock GPT Draft GPT, something where you could like weaponize AI. You coach it up on fantasy sports and draft requirements and all of that, which is super easy. And GPT honestly does a pretty good job already. And then you have it geared so that like you set it up via a site, and then you gear it so that like your first steps, like say you go to the website, right? Your first step is, all right, tell me the setup of your league. All right, we're 12 teams. It's head to head or roto scoring, whatever the system is. These wrinkles for our different system. You have keepers here. Here's the keepers. And then you could specifically tell it, all right, you can interact with the AI. You could tell it, all right, these are the 12 teams. These are their current rosters with keepers. These are the last 3 years of their draft history, if you've got that. And it could use that. It can analyze that against those player values at the time. And then you could also actually inject a degree of, my buddy Mike is sharp and has been a fantasy football expert professionally for years, so he's going to draft pretty well, but he's also, conservative about this, and he doesn't care about that. My buddy Lou is this, and you can really tell it, like, specifically, like, the personalities of the people. I think it would be a really interesting way to do, like, mocks and to, like, revolutionize mocks. So there's a free idea for the world. Is it something I'm going to do? I don't know. But I think it's interesting. Anyway. Getting into this slate a little bit. Who's the top optimal on FanDuel? I could resort by FanDuel here. We got a couple guys standing out to me down here. And John Morant, which is interesting. Donovan Clingan, which we talked about at length just a minute ago. I think if we resort this, it will be Clingan up at the top of the board still. Just because, oh no, actually, who is that? Damani Kamara popping up significantly. This is with the adjusted number by a minute for Kamara. But he's coming up at 70%. We're a little bit above the field. We're more significantly above the field on Trey Murphy, who I think is in a fantastic spot on the other side of that pacey, high-end, much, much higher totaled game at the end of the night. That New Orleans, this should be your game of focus, really. You're going to want several pieces from that game. 3 to 5 guys from that game makes a lot of sense to me. Gives you a lot of swappability at the end of the night, too, if you get, like, Ja doesn't play. We were talking about John not playing before the show too in the Discord, and somebody asked, "What do Scottie Pippen's minutes look like?" And my response was, my projection if he starts would be 28 minutes with an expectation between like 26 and 32. But I think it's really important to note that Scottie did not start in this situation the last time it came up. On the, when the hell was this? 17th, I want to say? Why did that go away? Why would this not be dated? That's dumb. Am I just missing where the date is? There it is, 17th. I was right. On the 17th, Ja was out, and they started Wells, Kennard, Bain, Triple J, and Edey. Scottie played off the bench and only got 16 minutes. Kennard played 26. Yeah, and then they had a bench of Aldama, Laravia, Clark, Scottie, Huff. Kallum didn't play. Conchar didn't play. Or they both played 2 minutes of garbage time at the end of the game. Most of that is healthy today. So it would really come down to, one, obviously John not playing. But I would want that starting lineup before I made any kind of big commitment to Scottie. And that's part of the reason I think it's very important if you're playing that game at all, or if you're counting on having some swaps, have several spots in that game. Very, very few options for swapping once you get down to it with only one game there. So you're going to want multiple spots so that you can go from high to low and level things out, rather than just, I had to go from that guy to that guy because I only had one spot, so I left 1,200 on the table in my revised lineup. That's suboptimal. That's not a good way to do swaps. So make sure you're blocking it out. It helps that that's, again, by far the most appealing game environment. That's at 244. The other ones are 228.5 and 222. So we've got 11, 15 points of daylight between those games? Pretty significant. Kenny Woodhouse is here. Whoop. Ashish Shah finished 5th in the $4 yesterday. Nice. Congrats. That must have been worth a pretty penny. Nice job. That popped up just as I was about to click on the thing just to get back there, and that was nice timing. Kenny Woodhouse, I was about to say hi to Kenny. Good to see you. That's awesome. Love seeing everybody do well. It seemed like a pretty good day across the board for a bunch of people out there. Still waiting on word from Could Be Trav, though. I want to see how his lineup came up. Again, he dropped that in chat at 10:20. Monster lineup with Jokic and Giannis where they have to go. Might have something percolating. Haven't heard since. Maybe he's out partying. Celebrating. Hopefully. Probably just at work. But anyway. Let's get into this a little bit. So again, we are going with the revised version. The projections on the site currently still have Klingin with 22 minutes. I'm debating which way I want to go, but I think it makes sense to talk about this version. So the good news is you can see significant pieces from that Memphis-New Orleans game already coming up. This is sorted by DK. You saw it just a second ago by FanDuel. And we're going to talk through both of them. So let's get into some positions. Even though there's only 3 games, we'll go positionally. Oh, look at that. Everything fits on the screen. How about that? That's an interesting little outlier. Tyrese Maxey for $10,000 on DraftKings. Really not coming up, but he's a little bit more valuable on FanDuel. Only $9,600. Point guard only on both sites. It's a 4.55 value. It's almost a full point value-wise below what we're looking for on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we're closer to the mark, 4.59. We want 5, but on a 3-gamer, as one of the highest ceiling, just raw scoring players on the slate, that's kind of an interesting spot. The bad news is that 12% that we're getting is below the field, and it looks like it's relatively significantly below the field. I don't love the spot going up against Cleveland. But there again, there's not much to choose from, and there's not much on the top shelf today. Let's see what that ownership looks like in the raw. Wow. Yeah, that's a big number. That's the wrong window. This is like a third of the field. That's interesting. Are they way higher on him than I am? Oh, 7. I've got him at. Bogging things down immediately on Tyrese Maxey, but this is the technically second most highly projected player of the day in my model on both sites. And he's coming up essentially not at all on DraftKings. And a third of where the field is on FanDuel. I don't know where they're picking that up. He's a 117 per minute player on FanDuel, 118 per minute player on DraftKings. They pick up a light uptick in possession, maybe. But not really. We've got him projected at the same minutes. My model's giving him credit for additional beyond his current production. And it looks like they've got him 2 full fantasy points ahead of me. Which is very interesting. I'm not entirely... I mean, that puts him... It gives him essentially a 1/10 of a point on top of what he's been producing against Cleveland. I don't love that idea. This is an interesting spot. Specific to FanDuel. On DraftKings, I think it's going to matter less. We are below the field, but I think that's a lot more low field ownership. Yeah, actually, on a relative scale, we're further from the field at 1%. But the field is more in the mid-teen kind of territory on him on DK. I do think, again, him being the second most highly projected player in the raw sense and one of the highest ceiling players on the entire slate with rock-solid minutes in the upper 30s, there's no reason to think that you couldn't grab more of them. But in both cases, you're just bringing him back to the field. It doesn't necessarily look like the best way to spend money. Like a good, not direct comp in terms of the player, but a good comp for like that situation is SGA the other night. When we were talking about SGA, he was coming up relative to the field a little bit lighter. And it was just, any given slate, he can go absolutely nuclear, and we know that. And he went out and put up like 80-something fantasy points and broke the slate that night. That's the kind of situation, especially on a little 3-gamer, that you could find yourself in with Tyrese Maxey. So a little bit more than this, no problem with it. I don't know that I would go out of my way and like bend the numbers to get to, 35%, 40%, something like that, which is where you'd need to be to get ahead of the field. At the top of the board, DeJounte Murray. Both sites, 38% on FanDuel, but below the field, kind of gently. 45% essentially with the field on the DraftKings board. 1.24 per minute on DK, 1.23 per minute on FanDuel. Again, New Orleans without numerous pieces as usual. Looking like a lot of upside. That is the paciest game of the day. It's got the highest total again by far. So all the DeJounte Murray you can carry, really, but it looks like it's keeping it a little bit lighter than the field. If I get back to 40, maybe 45-ish% on FanDuel, I don't know that I'm upset about it because I think he's a really good price fit at 86. You can see the 4.9 value score plays pretty well. And as far as just point guard only guys, it's Darius Garland, it's LaMelo, it's Ja. It's all high upside guys. That's actually interesting too. That's a lot of ownership on all those guys. So the point guard only guys on the slate are, again, Tyrese Maxey's on that list as well. And it looks like he's the guy that we've got the biggest negative position on. But it's interesting that they're all basically star caliber guys that are somewhat interchangeable at a variety of salaries. So this is a spot where on FanDuel, you can maybe mess with these positions a little bit. Now, we've got very clear cut above the field on LaMelo, above the field on Ja, with the field on Garland, a little bit below while having a significant share of DeJounte Murray, and then below the field on Maxey. But if you want to move some of this to some of this, if you project it slightly differently minutes-wise, if you just want to position yourself on the slate to have more of DeJounte Murray because of swappability, there's swappability between him and Ja, by the way, in that late spot. So if you roster it and then lose Ja, as long as you don't have Murray in the same lineup, you can obviously pivot that. There's a lot of back and forth flexibility while getting to a ton of those guys. We've got a little bit less of everybody. Actually, that's not entirely true. A little bit more of Garland, more of Murray, less of LaMelo, and less of Ja, and significantly less of Maxey. The same situation does exist here a little bit, but it just with how we land against the field, I would say the way that probably plays up is drawing one of these guys down to push one of these guys above the field if you were to look to influence those positions. But I think there's also just more interplay between the multi-position guys, between the guard-only spot and the util spot on DraftKings, where it matters a little bit less. $31 people here. Hit the like. It's only 4:15 early in the day. Tiny little 3-game slate to deal with today. So with that 3-gamer, I mean, we do have pretty broad distribution through that entire swath of players. It includes most of our relatively high projected players. The only real high projected guard that's outside of most of the ownership is Maxey. And then you get mix and match pieces like Scoot, Shaden Sharp, Kennard, Strus. Nobody critical down there. Ty Jerome at just 4,100. I think the field is getting to a little bit more strongly. We're only at 5%, a little bit below the field. The Kelly Oubres of the world, not really hitting this slate all that hard. So it looks like a lot of these lineups, I feel like, well, also accounting obviously for multi-position, but it's going to be a very clear value, high-end guy. And then when you're talking about a third option, probably directly into that mid-range. And that's where we're getting a lot of these 7s and 8s from. But there's plenty of room to spend some money at guard today. Nick Smith, once again, hitting the board. It's just cheap. 4,300 shooting guard only on FanDuel, a 4.95 value score, coming up 31%, level with the field. On DraftKings for just 42, he's got multi-position eligibility, which helps out. He's got a 5.31 value score, which helps out. 42% of our top 150 lineups do include him. That's above the field. Played 31 minutes the last time out. Put up just 18.7 fantasy points because he's not good. That's your problem in that play. But if we're getting anything approaching 28 minutes, which is where I've got him today, he is looking like a value play for sure. 0.8 per minute on DraftKings so far for this season, 0.76 on FanDuel. That's in just 13 and change minutes a night over 22 games. And again, not that good. That is an improvement on last year. The thing I said about him the last time, and it remains true, the thing that is at least a little bit interesting about him is that he does have an okay usage rate. Right, 19.1% this year. Last year it was 20.2%. That from that he only extracted 0.67 points per minute. But at least it makes him somewhat more interesting than these guys who come out here and become value plays with 14% usage, like these three down here, whoever they are. Who's that? Strus, Kennard, Cody Martin, Eric Gordon. He's a little bit better for than those guys just for the fact that he's going to take a few shots. He's also going to be involved a little bit, 14.8% assist rate, not a great facilitator, but it's at least, part of his role. So he's fine. He's not somebody that I want to get excited about, but I think having that little position on DraftKings is perfectly fine. On FanDuel, he's more of a moving part, but we got a lot of them just as a guy who helps lever up to get more upside in those other spots. Garland, LeVert, Mitchell, all on the board. FanDuel-wise, 24% and 19% for Garland and Mitchell, but LeVert didn't hit. He's 5,200 there. For 4,000 on DraftKings, he's a radically different play. He's also differently eligible position-wise. Point guard and shooting guard on DraftKings. Small forward shooting guard on FanDuel. We got him 32% of lineups in our top 150. Really, all he needs to do is play. I've only got him projected at 24 minutes. It's right on his average over 35 games this season. He can spike a little bit more. Again, no Mobley still. But we do need him to play. Missed their last game. If he doesn't go, it's downstream impact to the Merrills and Struses and Jeromes and so on of the world. Mom is here. Mom's got a busy day going on with the kids, so good luck, everybody. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. Woo, sounds like a nice win, though. Thanks again, Cujo and Power, for adding another $15K to the bankroll. Should have had first place again easy, but no time to late swap to Jones Jr. with the kids. Didn't matter with Dame, who was playing probably the easiest call I had all season. Yeah, you got shouted out for the Dame call in the Discord yesterday, too, Mamba. Good stuff, buddy. CA 1047. Cheers, money. Back at you. Cheers. Mamba, what's your read on the Donovan Clingan minutes? If you're still here. Curious to see where everybody is. I'm going to wrestle with that through the rest of the show and out the other side and through the updates. So any of the Cavs, and again, all three of them came up in the 30s at very different prices on the DraftKings slate. It's a nice little back and forth between Mitchell and Garland as far as that value goes. If you took more Garland at the expense of some of that Donovan Mitchell, I don't think that's a crazy idea. We're already a little bit below the field anyway on Donovan Mitchell. At 30%, I could draw that down to 25 without too much pain in those lineups. And if I'm putting it in to build a little plus position on a cheaper Darius Garland, I don't hate that. Garland's playing at 1.24 and Mitchell's playing at 1.27. And they're offset by a significant $800 price difference. Mitchell's got the multi-position, but don't really care that much. That's not going to make the difference. So I think that's a reasonable swing point on the DraftKings guard board. Either one of those guys, though, could absolutely go off in this spot. Anthony Simons, more of a mix and match piece to me. He came up level with the field on both sides, 28%, 26%. I did those backward. DraftKings is 28, 26% on FanDuel. Not making our value threshold on either site, but not many guys are. He's fine, but not ultimately crazy appealing. I'd rather save those guard shares for that late game, for that New Orleans-Memphis game, and spend them there. And not having a position, I think I would probably undercut this. I'd probably look to get it down maybe 20-ish%, spend some of those shares better up here, or maybe on some of the plus guys down here. But I think I'm okay getting away from Simons. For one, he's a 0.97 per minute guy on DraftKings. He's a 0.92 per minute guy on FanDuel. Look how many better options we have than that, just in the per minute sense, and at a variety of prices. It's just not a great option. Not that Charlotte's going to give him any kind of competition as far as defense goes. I'm not worried about that. But at 6,400, I feel like we can do a little bit better. And since we're just like with the field, I would take a little bit of a negative position there and build something else. I think that's a fair approach. 6,500 on FanDuel, 64 on DraftKings. He's at best like a meh is who he is kind of a play. LaMelo, 10.5, tons of upside on FanDuel, 36%. We're above the field. 4.81 is not a bad value score. Again, we're looking for 5. We've got one guy at 5, and that's Trey Murphy, who looks fantastic and who is our most highly exposed player among guards and second most, I want to say, on the entire slate on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it's a little bit closer. His 10.5 doesn't play quite as strong. Same price. Different cap, different exposures on some of these guys, different values. 27% and still above the field, but a lower overall share and a weaker position relative to the field. He's given us a 5.0 on the nose value score there, but again, we're looking for 5.5. We don't have a single 5.5 among guards, so that does play. I think it's a situation where if you can carry more LaMelo, you can take it. If you bail out of some of the Mitchell shares, maybe you can build your way there if you're moving some of this around. It's not an easy direct pivot, though. Other than from Maxey, who is still 500 cheaper, and we're not getting much of. I don't think it's a play where you would want to try and, I was tempted to say, maybe that creates a situation where you look to go down from LaMelo to Maxey, build a plus position there at the expense of some of that. But I don't think that's there. You'd have to do too much work to get that appreciably below the field and this above the field. That it's probably not worth the $500 savings. And you're probably better with the stronger overall player. 1.48 versus 1.18 to illustrate that point. That's worth more, honestly, than $500 in the salary scale. That 0.3 of a fantasy point per minute is very, very significant. Ja is another comparable point. Ja plays generally lighter minutes, but gives you 1.40 over those minutes. So those guys are both pretty significantly offset from Maxey. Helps explain the Maxey exposure overall. CJ, Desmond Bane, Trey Murphy, Ja Morant, Jalen Wells, Jordan Hawkins, Jose Alvarado to a degree. Any/multiple of those pieces are going to be significant to your lineups on basically both sites. A little bit more so, I think, on FanDuel, where we're getting 57% of Trey as a 5 value score. Above the field, he's got small forward and shooting guard eligibility for 81. 1.04 per minute overall for the season. They're coming in with a big uptick Uptick in pace, uptick in possessions. I've got him playing at 117 today. So nice big uptick. And that applies to a lot of these guys from New Orleans. That's why we're seeing a lot from that side. Could they flat out disappoint? Are they a bad team? Yeah. Woo, Mama's going high side. Mama's got Klingen at 27. All right, so that would be the original version from the beginning of the show plus 5 minutes. He would be an absolute lock in that situation if he plays 27. Steven, I appreciate you, buddy. Steven Jongitude says, is it Youngitude? Longitude? Youngitude? Oh, there's another U in there. I'm curious if the J is silent. Youngitude? Steven Youngitude? You said you appreciate the Spanish guy, so maybe there's like a little Latin flair on that. It's a cool last name either way. So Steven says, I like to listen to your before-year-old employer write up a lot, but I've always appreciated your take and how you say the Spanish guy's last name. My brothers wish everybody good luck tonight. Back at you, buddy. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate the kind words. Appreciate everybody. All the likes, the subscriptions, the memberships at the site. Again, if you're new, handful of new people I'm sure out there, check out rotoscouts.com. Trying to keep it very, very price friendly. Access to all the projections, NBA, NHL, every single main slate for both of those. What's left of NFL, baseball right around the corner. Anything else we can come up with in between. Probably going to pile in some season-long baseball this year. Everything under $1 a day for access to all of it. Rotoscouts.com. Give it a look. The sims that we're looking at, these run again with my projections and numbers as my board. But we use acemind.io to run the sims. They've also got an optimizer tool over there. Promo code Rotoscouts, all in caps, still gets you 20% off your first month with those guys. Encourage you to check them out. Steven says, yeah, the J is silent. You can say it like Jose, but you say it both ways. You know, the longitude, latitude. I didn't like it when I was growing up at school. Yeah. I figured that as I was trying to sound it out. I was like, I probably got a lot of longitude, latitude as a kid. Yep. I could see not liking geography class, history class because of that. I get you. I appreciate you anyway, buddy. Or not anyway. I appreciate you and your name. No anyway about it. So Mamba, going back to Klingen there, it's just the coming off the injury that I'm a little worried about. But again, he was realistically playing those minutes before he got hurt. And in this situation the last time out, he played those 27 minutes exactly. So I'd love to give him that. I don't think I can, in good conscience, give him that projection-wise like what's up on the site. But maybe, that is a good argument again for going back to like the 22 I originally had him at, which made him essentially a slate bender. Very different depending on 3 minutes projection-wise for Donovan Klingen tonight. Completely different slate. If you want to see what it looks like, rewind to the very first couple minutes of the show. Later, after the show's over. Or whenever you want. I don't care. John Morant, definitely a piece if he goes. 8,700. 46%, one of our most highly exposed, one of our best plus positions against the field on FanDuel. Just under a 5 value score from one of the star caliber players on the slate. 136 per minute on FanDuel. I was just saying it before. 140 per minute on DraftKings. And offset nicely price-wise. $1,000 difference for better production between him and Maxey. $1,500 difference for very similar per minute production between him and LaMelo. Less exposure. Projected for fewer minutes. I've only got him at 30. He's only averaged 28.5 for the season over 26 games. Obviously in and out of the lineup, and Memphis goes all over the place. But in 31-9 the other day, he put up 47.3 FanDuel points as if to illustrate the point for us. So he looks great. Again, tons of Trey. Desmond Bane, 32 minutes. One of the more solid chunks of minutes on Memphis today in that highly desirable game environment. 34% level with the field FanDuel, 26%, a little bit above the field. He's 7,900 on the DraftKings slate. I could see him easily playing 2 to 5 additional minutes. He played 33-7 in their last game, depending on how competitive that one stays. there could be additional run there, or if Ja doesn't go, if there's missing pieces and he's just got to do more out there, I could see him playing additional upside, and we would have a rate uptick, I'm sure. So definitely a spot to keep an eye on. And again, this, I hope, just illustrates between that. Even I'll throw Luke Kennard into the mix, even though he barely comes. Actually, I won't. But like, all of this and DeJounte, this is just, and I miss CJ. This is just the guards, or guards in some of the forwards. That's how significant that New Orleans-Memphis game is going to be, and that's a good illustration of why you want multiple guys from that game in most of those lineups, especially with some of them questionable, just for the swappability between. I'm going to lose until I win the millies here. He says, missed the show, but I'll replay it in 2x speed. Technically, you haven't missed the show. We're still only like midway through the guards. Been meandering a little bit, as usual. It's only a three-game slate. There's a lot of time to work with. Socialty is like somewhere in between, Dan, I'd say. They're like, I mean, that's unfair. They're punk, and they go back in the punk industry to like the late 70s, early 80s, I want to say. So they're like founding LA punk. They've just always had like a poppy kind of feel to them. And then in the 90s, the 2000s, when pop punk, the Blink 182s and some 41s and so on of the world got so big, I think they got a little bit mislabeled that way, and I just did it myself. But they're founding LA punk scene members. I want to say 78, 79. 78. Yeah, so they technically predate Bad Religion by a year. Steven says, on FanDuel, I was thinking about spending up at the forward position at Allen and Triple J and then paying Mark Williams at center. What do you think on FanDuel? Let me put the forwards and centers on the board real quick. Actually, I'll tell you what. I'll keep that question in mind. Let me wrap up the guards here because I think we're most of the way through it. Let's just look for a couple last outliers, discussion points. Paul George, like I said, 18% FanDuel below the field while still having some 19% DraftKings, same position. I don't mind that. Grindy game environment, Cleveland and Philly. It's Paul George. I'm not in love with the player. 1.08 per minute FanDuel, 1.10 per minute on DraftKings. For those mid-eights kind of prices, I think he needs to get a little bit cheaper to be super appealing even on a short slate like this. I could absolutely see him going off for a decent day, but Cleveland makes it a little bit more difficult. The lack of an Embiid makes it a little bit more difficult. The lack of a Lowry makes it a little bit more difficult while he still has to do more given those guys' absence. I don't mind him, but just like Maxey, I'm happy to be a little bit below the field. I think if you end up in the 22% range on either site, you're fine, while still just a more gentle position below the field. A few additional shares is no problem, but I wouldn't get overexposed to the Paul George play. Just a 4.51 value on FanDuel, 4.87 on DraftKings, further on DK from the value. Jalen Wells, 17%, is who he is, kind of a spot to a degree. Again, that's the most appealing game by far on the entire slate, and we're getting tons of everybody. But out of everybody, he's one of the guys that comes up more of an is who he is. He's cheap. He's easy to reach. 17% were above the field on FanDuel. 11% were more level with the field at 44 on DraftKings. He's not a standout value by any stretch of the imagination on either side. But a lot of these guys are just interchangeable parts today. It's low-end value day in a lot of ways. A lot of mid-board guys coming up. And then we've got just mix and match shares of the Ubres, the Alvarados, the Jeromes, Struces, Kennards, Sharps of the world. And that's on both sides. Single-digit exposure to most of those guys. If anybody wants to talk about any of those guys in particular, you can shout it out and we can go through them. Cleveland guys potentially get more interesting if LeVert doesn't play. Portland guys really are who they are. Scoot only played 14 in their game last night, by the way. Didn't start. Was that last night or the night before? Whenever it was. So that's one to watch. I put him back to 26. That could be lighter. That's a little bit fragile in my mind. Again, Pippen right now just at 16. Question mark in my mind if Ja doesn't go. Pippen did not start that game the last time out. Last time Ja didn't play, he only played these 16 minutes in a backup role. Kennard got the start. Potentially a spot to watch. Let's jump to forwards and let's answer Steven's question. Put everybody on the board here real quick. And we'll resort by FanDuel because he's asking about FanDuel. So Steven says, thinking of spending up at the forward position on Allen and Triple J and then paying Mark Williams at center. So I think the Mark Williams at center is probably going to be, well, maybe not my most favorite. I was going to say it was probably going to be my most favorite, but not the way those results came out. I don't mind going to Mark Williams at center at all. He should have the opportunity to roll over whatever Portland puts out there at center, for one thing. I'm giving him 32 minutes. The issue is he's priced up at 8,500 now. It's not like he's sneaking in here as a value play, but even at that, we're still at a 4.9 value. That's just below our threshold. It's competitive at worst with everybody that we're getting more than him at any position. We got him 16% of the time, level with the field. He's a 1.47 per minute player on the entire slate, and that's in a smaller sample. Technically, that's our highest per minute fantasy guy, Mark Williams. Welcome to 2025. At 1.45 on DraftKings, he falls short of only teammate LaMelo Ball in a per minute sense. Is that going to hold up for the rest of the year? I sincerely doubt it. Again, that is small sample. 18 games, 23 and a half minutes a night. But he's been playing significantly more minutes. He's been playing very, very well. So I have no issue whatsoever going to Mark Williams in that spot. That's especially if you consider Kamara more in this territory where, again, knocking him down to like 20 minutes and 21 and a half points from 22 minutes and like 24 and a half points just brought him from like 70 to still like half of all lineups. But if you want to get away from that, going to the other side and attacking him is not a bad idea whatsoever. The other guys that you mentioned, Triple J is always an option for me. 1.37 per minute. Good news for your play. He came up at 47% in our FanDuel lineups in the top 150. So an enthusiastic yes on Triple J. And then the other one I think was Jarrett Allen, who did not look as good. Yeah, how is he? There he is. So we did get him 13% of the time. He's got center and power forward eligibility, which is how you're obviously able to get there. 117 per minute for the season on FanDuel, 114 on DraftKings. We're below the field on Jarrett Allen on both sides. I'm not overly concerned for anything about the matchup against Philly. The minutes should be there. If anything, I'm a little bit light. I've got him at 30. He played 32 and change the last time out. Put up nearly 50 fantasy points on FanDuel. It's another spot. I really have no issue with you using him in that spot. What I would say is you do have other guys kind of up the board at similar prices. I don't love Miles Bridges, but given the way that he came up at 74, power forward and small forward eligible, it buys you $400 to maybe upgrade something else with. If you're not a big fan of Bridges, you've got Grant there. Depending on your flexibility into the small forward spot, the guy I like the best in this group is Trey Murphy, but he doesn't have power forward, which is presumably the spot we're talking about. But at worst, I absolutely love two of those guys in Triple J and Mark Williams, and I don't think you're making a mistake at all by plugging Jarrett Allen into any given lineup on FanDuel. You can see we got him, again, 13%. We're just across 150 lineups relative to the field. We're at lighter exposure. Yabu's an interesting one, 5,800 at power forward. He came up at 9% and level with the field. He's a lighter per minute guy. The usage is a little bit lighter. You know, I like going when given the option. I'll kind of tend to go toward more established, better per minute types. But I think Yabu's easily on the board today. Got him at 30 minutes 5,800 FanDuel. He's got the multi-position power forward and center. He's a lot more relevant on the DraftKings slate. 30% exposed level with the field. He's one of the top options at forward. So let's resort by DK. Steven, hopefully that helped to answer the question. I hope I didn't give you too much of a yes, but on all those guys. I try not to do that. It's just so we're dealing with something where there's black and white to it to a degree, like as far as how the numbers stand. But then as we know, after lock, all bets are off, and there is a lot of gray area between how these things bounce off of one another in the answers to these questions. So hopefully I don't come off like I'm just trying to, fence sit on those answers. I try to never do that. My least favorite thing in the world is the weather guy for MLB when he says, this one might rain, might not. I could have told you that. CA 1047 says Triple J turns into a prime dunk without Morant. Yeah, if Ja's not out there, that rate I do believe goes up. Ben Simmons is retiring? Is that true, Brian? Underdog doesn't have that yet. In fact, Underdog is only reporting Saturday news over the last 45 minutes or so, which is good news for us. Basketball Monster has a note. Bleacher Report says 2 hours ago, Nets Ben Simmons says he considered NBA retirement amid back injury rehab. Looks like he was talking about, he made a heartfelt statement about not appreciating Philadelphia enough. I'm not saying it as he's actually retiring. They might have interpreted it wrong at Basketball Monster. It sounds like he was saying that he considered retiring, and then he talked in, regretful terms about his time in Philly. OMG Lowell says, I like the slate. I live in the garbage. Yeah, look, I mean, these slates do create opportunity. It's not like it used to be. Public has gotten so sharp these days, or, the public is guided very, very well these days. Present company aside. Guided well, hopefully, but you guys are also sharp. A lot of the public is just dumb, but guided well. But it's a lot more difficult to gain edge even on these garbage slates because public just goes right to the top plays that are created because they're well guided these days. So not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. You got it, Steve. Appreciate it. Let's sort for forwards. I'll put centers on the board too. And we'll go by the DK stuff as usual. Oh, who's not coming through down there? Ricky Council and GG. I did not correct for those guys. This is not going to matter at all, but we'll put them on the board. It is funny that the other GG on the slate is Reggie Jackson when I'm looking for GG Jackson. Is he Gregory? Is that what it is? How about that? I think it's initials. Whatever it is, it'll be the other way. Yep, no initials. I knew it. He's not even going to come up, but I'm a show completionist. There we go. 0%. That was worth doing. So, again, Mark Williams on DraftKings, by the way. That question was geared toward FanDuel, so that's where we were talking about. It looks like dynamite on DraftKings at 78. They haven't increased his price enough yet He's playing at 1.45 per minute on DraftKings. Again, the second highest overall rate on the DK slate, just behind LaMelo. Again, that small sample, it's not going to stay that way all season, but he's presumably going to be a well above 1 per minute fantasy guy going forward. So I think you absolutely mash that button. 5.24 is a crucial value score on the day. Looks fantastic to the DraftKings board. Nick Smith coming out of that same thing. We talked about him already during the guards, but coming up at 42% and above the field. Both of those guys are closer to the field's exposure than like our Javonte Green play up at the top of the board. Then it looks like we're getting on Jeremy Grant, who is kind of cheap now, just 5,400. He's only playing at 0.83 this year. That's a full 1/10 of a point down from where he played last year. Usage is down just 19.6%. But remember, we're dealing with no Ayton tonight, so there's opportunity there. There's a couple other mix and match pieces. There's a couple guys that are playing banged up. So I don't hate the Grant option. 38.6% on DraftKings above the field. It's a position. It's short of our value threshold, but basically everybody is outside of top of the board Javonte, and that's it. Is he the only player on the entire DraftKings slate that's above 5.5? I think he is. Yeah. So not only on a slate where we're looking for the 5.5 number in that value score column, the best option on DraftKings is only at 5.52. That's how light we are on just pure value plays today. Everybody else is below the value threshold by at least 0.12. Next highest value guy is Klingon at 5.38. This is higher if you go to the original version where it was 22 minutes. I think this was more in like the 6 territory. I know it was above 6 on FanDuel for the 38. But it's a really light value slate. Again, the only guy above the threshold is Javonte Green. You've got more to work with in that sense on FanDuel. Not only do you have the absurd 5.6 on Klingon, even in the 20-minute sense, but you've got a 5 on Kamara. You've got several guys in the 4.9s. You've got a 5 on Murph. Several guys in the 4.8s. A 5.19 on Misi, who we haven't talked about yet, and a bunch of 4.9s right here. So we're a lot closer to where we typically are on value on FanDuel, I feel like. Just interesting that way. Interesting that he's currently the only guy above that threshold, though. Feel free, by the way, as usual, when I go off on these tangents to boo or say this isn't interesting or whatever. This is the stuff that I find interesting. I love diving into those weird little corners on slates. I feel like you can extract a decent amount of value from things like that. Best play at center, regardless of price, on DK single entry. Can I give you Mark Williams? I think it probably is Williams, but he would be eclipsed if you give Klingon more minutes. If you give Klingon 3 to 5 more minutes, or even 7 more minutes like Mom was doing, like he played the last time he was in this situation, then it would probably be Klingon for the just value square. But what you would probably do in that situation, honestly, would be Klingon at util, Williams at center, or the other way around, Javonte Green at forward, and then whatever you want in every other spot. I think that would be the approach then, because Klingon would be up here, but these two guys wouldn't be changed really. Those two guys I think would still stay up in that territory. Where you would see some dip would be in more that group of guys. These guys would be a little further below the field. These guys would be closer to the field, and so on. So I think that's the way that would go. Just speculating. But right now, the way this is configured with a 20-minute projection on Klingon and assuming that he's still a little bit banged up, which is where that hesitance comes from, it would be Mark Williams. Yeah, Ja missed morning shoot-around, went questionable during the day. That's why we're talking about if Ja doesn't play, X, Y might happen. But a major question mark there, though, too. We're going to need that starting lineup before we really know what that's going to look like. Fortunately, we know that if Scottie Pippen is in the starting lineup, we're looking again. I would project him at 28 minutes. We know what the rate is. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we know it. It's easily accessible. And that's the way I would project it, with an expectation of a range from 26 to 32 minutes, right? When I project 28 minutes, I don't mean he's definitely playing 28 minutes. It typically means he's between X and Y, and we middle it. I think 26 to 32 would be the acceptable range for that play, assuming a start. But he didn't start the last time Ja didn't play. So that's the spot to watch there with Ja. Yeah, Brian, it would be surprising if Monster had that wrong. Like I say, it could very easily just be a case of like somebody misread something and posted it. And but you're right, they are super reputable. It's not like a fly-by-night kind of, it's not like you read somebody's tweet and reported it, And the best way to, if you don't play 150, I think, to me, the best thing to do is do exactly this. Right? This is just a sim. It's run for 150. But what you can extract from here is who the best plays. And then you just put these together. So if I'm building a lineup on say, DK, I'm taking several of those options. And you just start putting things together. And let's see. Can I do this easy? Come on. I should put together a little Excel lineup builder at some point. Yeah, this isn't worth doing where you guys can't see it. So what we want to do is you can do it either via optimal rates. How often is this guy in the top lineup in Sims? But I think the better way to do it is like what we're looking at here, in the top 150 exposure. Because that's going to tell you how frequently the guy is in just the best overall lineups without zeroing in on just the absolute nuts each of those Sims. I think it makes each of those Sims much, much more worthwhile because you're getting a much bigger chunk of data out of each of the 30,000 times it runs in each of the 5 Sims. So I think I would use this to put together lineups, and what I'm shooting for there is I want to build essentially the optimal lineup via these scores. So I'd be looking, my first instinct would be to put Mark Williams at center. I would plunk Javonte Green into the forward spot with expectation that I can move him into small forward, power forward as needed. If I need, if I want to go 2 power forwards and I need that forward spot, I can slide him to small forward. Obvious, right? It's how multi-position works. Everybody knows that. I would do the same probably with Nick Smith at guard. And now I've got that little foundation of those 3 guys. I've got a top end, the guy I consider the best center for a very fair price, and 2 value guys. So now I can immediately jump and put Triple J in there, say at util, or make that the second power forward that goes in there, which I think probably makes the most sense. But I would very much be just building, use that group of players, say that 30+%, you could consider the guys that are, above 20%, or more to the point, even just anybody who's level with the field or above the field, which is that group of these guys. You would want, that is a group of, 9 players? 9 players. Hell, if you could get those 9 guys, you would take just those 9 guys, right? That's probably the closest you could get to optimal. Doesn't look like they all fit together. For one, we don't have a point guard in there. But to the point, you would want 5 or 6 of those 9 guys in that lineup. And that's what people refer to as a core. I don't really like to talk about cores because that suggests to people that you need everybody in that lineup or you need everybody in every lineup. But these are your most playable, most important rotational pieces in the right now version of this version of the slate. Again, with several big wild cards on the board. But that becomes your go-to core of players. And I forgot that we don't have all the players on the board right now. So we have more to work with. We would have a point guard in that mix. Let me put this back together. So it would be more like this group of guys. And now you're talking about a group of 17 players from which you can say, I want 5 or 6 of those guys. And there's a lot more interchangeable parts in here now. And you could probably take like the top 9 guys there. That's 8. No, 54. So you would need to cut one guy out of that and change for somebody a little bit cheaper. But obviously you don't necessarily want to build with like the straightforward top guys. But that's very much how I would hand build a lineup. That's very much how I would build a lineup for a single entry. And then you're looking at those small moves that I talk about, right? So if you put together just, let's say the top straightforward 9 guys just worked out of the box. I would look to swap 2 of those guys, and there'd probably be like the guys I'm closest to the field on from the lower end. You know, this close to the field is a little bit better than these 2 close to the fields. So maybe I'm looking to swap these 2 guys for 2 guys in like this kind of territory. Just small moves, small changes. That's how I would approach it. So these sims, this kind of tool, that's why I always say, you know, for hand builders, 2 people who play 150 lineups, these tools work just as well. You're getting the same information. It's just how you weaponize it then. And you want to make sure if you're only entering one lineup that you don't just have like the dead optimal from somebody's site, because out of everything, with as much as the numbers, the collision, the combinatorics of any given slate create just wide diversity anyway, if you just play the pure optimal from anybody's projections, you're going to get just multiple repeats and annoying. You're not going to have any leverage. So you still want to play that game. But very much you can work with the numbers that you get out of these sims that are geared toward 150 lineups to build 1 lineup, to build 5 lineups. Michael Knack kind of likes Kennard over Pippen regardless. I feel like regardless is strong. 0.89 per minute versus 1.09 for one thing. We're talking about 0.2 of a fantasy point per minute difference. And we know that Scotty can play upper 20s minutes when he does start. I think it really comes down to who's getting the start in the situation where Ja doesn't play. Like if Pippen starts, I don't know that I would sink that much into Kennard, because it would be like an at best you're getting this kind of a situation, I think. Maybe a little bit of an uptake. Like maybe he kicks up to like 26-minute projection and looks a little bit better. But I don't know that it's a blanket like either way. I think it comes down to who's in that starting lineup. I don't really break it down to that level. You'd have to go back and look. I haven't gone back to look at what the configuration actually looks like. I just pay attention to where the minutes fall down. That's an Engelman question, it feels like. He's got that zeroed down. My board, I have set up, like, you know, with every position laid out where it could just add everything up, and I just use the last column where it's just total minutes. Yeah, Ken, and that's what I was zeroing in on specifically the last time that Ja didn't play. Kennard started, Scotty played just the 16 that I've got him projected for right now, and Kennard got the full run, but Kennard only played 26 in that situation also, so it's not a massive uptick from like where he is right now at 24, but I would probably move him to 28. It's also just a team that plays kind of flat minutes and a lot of guys, which is just, they're one of the more irritating teams that way as far as projecting them. Let's get back to whatever we've got left of forwards and centers. 5 o'clock. It's gotten to be a deep show for a 3-gamer. I feel like we've talked about most of this group. Again, Triple J looks fantastic on basically either site. We're better positioned against the field on FanDuel, where we got him in nearly half of lineups and aggressively ahead of the field. Jeremy Grant, also looking pretty solid on the FanDuel slate. He looks stronger relative to the field on DraftKings, but I think the better raw play, the better between those two guys, and obviously offset by a big price difference, is Triple J. If you can carry more of him, I would. I think if you're looking to build a position relative to the field, it would be a plus position on Triple J on DraftKings, just especially with how strong that game environment is compared to everything else. Eve Misi at 51. Not a bad option there. If I'm taking less of Jeremy Grant, I don't mind getting more of Yves Missi and using the util spot, obviously, for that. But we're already 33% above the field there, so I don't mind that. Millie, I've got him at 18 minutes. Where is he? He really didn't hit that hard, which is kind of surprising. I mean, the value obviously stands out down here at 5.2. But I gave him those 18 minutes. And he really didn't pop. I'm surprised at 31. Potentially just getting blocked. Like we've got $3,900 Dean Wade pulling a little bit of weight. $3,200 Josh Okogie's getting a little bit. $3,300 center Jabari Walker's getting a little bit. Klingon is getting his, wherever the hell he is, at 4,000. So we've just got kind of a broad board of guys at not exactly as cheap, but competitive prices that are projected for more minutes and maybe better rates. But yeah, that was on my radar. Apologies for not bringing them up. But I projected it as 30 minutes for Allen, 18 minutes for Thompson, and just a direct 1-2 situation. On a differently shaped slate, I could see him coming up more. Or if you move some of the minutes around, obviously he would land a little bit more. At worst, though, I do think he's an interesting enough wild card. 2%, obviously, that's level with the field, so it's not like you got to do a lot of work across 150 to get there and to build a plus position on him. All right, let me throw in the caveat that the guys who ran the ownership are projecting him for 9 minutes today, so essentially half, and basically no ownership. But presumably, if they doubled their number on him, they would only get him in the 2 to 5% range publicly anyway, via how I think their model works. So if you're building 150 and you said, "Hey, I want to use Tristan Thompson as a lever at 3,100," and that nobody's going to, and gain a little bit of potential leverage on a sneaky value play like that, he's at worst a wild card like that. I wouldn't go crazy and put him in half my lineups if I'm building 150. If you're building like 3, could he go into one of them? Sure. You're taking a strong position that's technically 33% of your lineups, but you're doing it for a specific reason as a wild card kind of a play that is going to create a very differently shaped lineup. So I don't think he's out of the question. Played just 13 in their last one, but played in the 20s game before that, I want to say. Maybe it was 2 games before that. Game before that, 26. If he goes anywhere near 26, could be in trouble. So that would be the reason to potentially want him. But again, at 18, I think he's at least reasonable. And that 18 kind of covers a range from, call it 15 to 21. 3 minutes in either direction. So yeah, he's on the board. Just not necessarily mathing out great. That's why you want to sometimes glance at this column and just look for little outliers like that. Anytime you spot an outlier like that where it's popping for a little bit of value, even though it's not coming up sim-wise, it's definitely creating that potential wild card. Kind of the same deal with Jabari Walker. Only 3,300. I projected him at 20 minutes. That's trying to remember how I did it in the original version. Hold on. In the version that's on the site right now, it's Klingon at 22, Walker at 20, and Dwight Breath at just 6 minutes. Again, that could fall differently. I think Walker's range probably plays between 18 and 22, somewhere in that territory. Not a good overall player, but 0.85 per minute gives him a little bit of value. I wouldn't go crazy for him. He only came up 6%, level with the field. but again, as a wild card with a reasonable expectation that he's going to play unless we get the outcome that we got the last time, which was that Klingon got the start, Dwap got the direct backup minutes for 16, and Walker only got 2 minutes alongside Dwap at the end of the game. This is what I mean when I say there's a lot of fragility on this slate. For a 3-gamer, it's kind of crazy. Yabu we've talked about. Misi, definitely an interesting play. I mentioned him briefly before. Again, 33% above the field on DK. 23% level with the field, giving us a solid 5.19, well above our value threshold on the FanDuel slate. Looking super playable for 5,300. Center only, that kind of sucks. It's limiting against the single center site, but we're getting a little bit of distribution with, Williams at 16, him at 23. We've got 48% obviously going to Klingon still, especially if you're drawing this down. The Misi spot is interesting. The Mark Williams spot is interesting, and we would get larger shares of either of those guys if you take this further down. Aldama, not really wild about. 5,600. He does have power forward and center eligibility on FanDuel. We got him a little ahead of the field, 16%. It's right in the territory that I want to be. If he came up level with the field in like the 12, 15 range, that's also fine. 26% on DK. He's only 48 over there. It's a pretty big price difference. Puts him at a 5.20 value. It's a 1.14 per minute player in the most appealing game of the day. I kind of like him at this price and would say maybe try and grab a little bit more at that price. And at this price, I'm just, again, okay with being right about here. This spot is interesting. Murph, we've talked about at length, but again, hyper appealing on FanDuel. Definitely important on DraftKings at 82. Miles Bridges, assuming he's out there. Remember, he and LaMelo are both questionable, as is Santi in that other game, just because I was just talking about him. But he and LaMelo are both questionable. If he's out there, 56% level with the field, technically a little bit below the field, it looks like on FanDuel. Slightly below our value threshold. But just such a crunch for NBA quality in Charlotte overall. I don't mind any shares, but I think I'd rather have a stronger, especially if it's coming up a little bit negative already. I'd probably push that a little further negative. Take a little bit of a hit against the field there and spend it more wisely up there. And on DraftKings, I think you could even maybe get more aggressive about that. We're already a significant undercut to the field at 20%. 7,400, no multi-position on the DK board. He's a 1-1-3 player. There's nothing wrong with him. But the way he's coming up at price relative to the other options, I do think you can get away from that a little. Jared Allen's kind of in that same boat. We talked about him, though, before in terms of the question that was asked. I do think he's perfectly fine to play. He's a very good player, and that mostly applies to Miles Bridges as well. So any shares that you've got out of that 20% of either of those guys, you don't go rush and replace. Those are fine. It's just relative to where the field's at, relative to where we want to be on some other plays, you've got to cut something. And those guys are falling a little bit by the wayside. They're not quite reaching our DK value thresholds. Miles Bridges is closer to value on FanDuel. Allen's a little further away. Paul George, we talked about. Again, Kamara, the most highly exposed player on FanDuel in our top 150 at 70%. That's with a 29-minute projection on him. I could see 30 and change. I could see 28. Probably not much less than that. It's only a 0.76 per minute guy, 14.2% usage, sub 10% assist rate, sub 10% rebounding rate, 53.4% true shooting. He's not exactly an impressive player. We're just kind of getting there on value. He's exactly at our value threshold. Fills multiple positions. There's like just enough to work with that I think it's landing him in a ton of lineups. Charlotte, easy enough opponent. Technically the lowest end game environment of the day, but again, there's nothing wrong with a 222-point total. It's also the most competitive game of the day. If I sound like I'm trying to talk my way out of having 70% to money Kamara, I kind of am. But it's there. Numbers-wise, it's there. We're only somewhat above the field, but it is at least a plus position. I wouldn't want to cut it down and land just with the field. So we'll take our position there. 17% level with the field on DraftKings. That's a much more comfy spot. It's not a big price difference, only 52. Maybe the positioning has something to do with it. 4.90 value score on DK when we need the 5.5. Not quite getting there. That's where I'd rather be overall. But this makes sense over here. Dean Wade at 22.15. I'm fine taking this a little bit more negative. Get it to like 15 against 22. Have a position on a guy like Dean Wade. He's multi-position eligible, but just a 4.58 value, a sub 20 projection in 26 minutes. He's a 0.80 guy. In terms of usage, I think he's the lowest overall usage rate among any of the expected regulars on this slate. You don't want to just be with the field on that guy, because you gain nothing on the day that he succeeds. In a day like this, congratulations, you're just with a quarter of the field, and it's not buying you much. I'd rather be away from it for the days that he fails where people are getting there. So I think 15 is much more reasonable. He's fine. He's not a bad option. He's priced appropriately. But it's not a spot to get excited about, and I don't want to be just with the field. This looks correct. Right where you want to be. 15% below the field. He's 3,900. You can still have him. 498. We're off the value mark. Klingon's a better value. $3,500 Brandon Clark is looking like a better value. $3,300 Jabari Walker, who we talked about. $3,100 Tristan Thompson, who we talked about. All giving you better value scores. Jalen Wells coming up playable at worst. 17% on FanDuel, 11% on DraftKings. Shooting guard and small forward eligible on both. We're definitely well below the value threshold on both sites. But positionally and price-wise, I think it's part of what's making him come up somewhat. This is a 17% usage guy. There's a handful of extra shots there compared to the 10s, 14% usage types, but he's not a huge option. A little bit of a potential uptick in rate depending on who's active, who's not. At worst, he's playable. I wouldn't push too much beyond where we're at. Maybe if you get to like 20 on FanDuel, you're okay, and that would be a more stark direct up position. If you get to 15, if you're looking to build a little bit of a position on a guy that not a ton of the field is going to on DraftKings, it's not terrible. But he's not the most appealing guy in the world either at that low-end rate. Everybody else on DK, we are getting shares of a lot of these guys. It's limited, but it's technically kind of a deep board. Clark, Okogie, Denny, Jabari Walker again. Justin Edwards, kind of maybe interesting. He's only 3,800, both forward spots on DraftKings. Just 4% exposed. That's technically a little bit below the field. It's another guy. He's a low-end per minute producer in limited action so far. 13 games, 19 and change minutes per night. In nearly 28 minutes the other day, he put up just 17 fantasy points. He's a 0.64, 0.67 guy. But for super cheap, where nobody's going there, on a day where you're just kind of competing against a lot of other options that are not dissimilar, it's not a terrible rotational guy to have in your pocket as a value. Given the security of mid-20s minutes, it's playable. On FanDuel at 39, doesn't look like it hits quite as well, but technically it came up significantly more. Why would that be? Yeah, I guess that at forward, we actually have more value, it looks like, on the DraftKings side, where I made that comparison and it was heavier on the guard side on FanDuel. It's the complete opposite situation. So I think it's just a case where that 4.54 plays a little bit better, and you can see it just in the shading than that 4.53 obviously does on DraftKings. So doesn't look like a good play, but we got there. This might be a big bucket full of happenstance, but it does look like the field's there somewhat. But if you reran this, he could easily come up 12%, and we would have more of just some of these guys. I think he's a moving part. Shaden Sharp, 8%. Again, mix and match kind of a play. Him, Scoot, there's no real interest in either of those guys. And then nobody really down the board unless things change. Ricky Council, mid-teens minutes, no thank you. GG Jackson, low-end, sub-10 minutes. Chris Murray, mid-teens. Yeah, not much down there. Tristan Thompson is like the stop point. Nobody wants Josh Green. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl doesn't have enough time unless something changes. That is about the bottom of the bucket, gang. Can Scoot ever be played again? I mean, if he's in the starting lineup and they're like, we're not going to jerk his minutes around, then sure. Especially if his price is okay. Right now, his price is wrong. The minutes are in question. He's not that good. Yeah, not a fan. Let's go Yanks. Absolutely, Steven. Yeah, we'll be... yeah, I knew what you meant when you said that. But yeah, we'll be all over MLB this year. Like I've been threatening, I think I'm going to drop some season-long coverage on the site. I don't know if it'll be in the form of shows, but like those are kind of easy to knock out to just be like, here's a mock draft 10-minute video. And then, for me, I'll talk for an hour. Anyway, I think that brings us up toward the end. 5:17. Going to be a weird long stretch before this slate starts with so few games and not much news coming through. Give me some time to get on finishing up the NFL projections, though. So if you're looking for those, NFL projections will be live on the site a little bit later this evening. NBA continuous updates throughout up until the lock of that last game. NHL projections for the 4-game NHL slate are up on the site. Monster 14-game NHL, 10-game or NBA 10-game NHL slates tomorrow. I'll be all over those. Probably won't be a show as usual on Saturdays, but projections, content will be all live on the site. I will do the groups and the notes and everything article and rankings for the football slate. Anthony Taylor's Dodgers keep getting arms. Dodgers keep getting everything. And those deferred payments work out pretty nicely. It's the future's problem. There might not even be a Los Angeles in 2045. Let them worry about it. Let the Terminators deal with it. Yeah, I think baseball is going to end up, I was saying it yesterday, I think baseball is going to end up in a big labor stalemate for a while whenever the next CBA comes around, and I assume that something's going to get done. I'm not calling for a salary cap in baseball, but something's going to get done about that deferred spending because it's gotten a little bit silly. That said, I'm not giving the Dodgers the World Series crown. It's baseball. Baseball's the great equalizer among sports. You can spend all the money you want. You could have as pretty a roster as you want, and it might not get there. They're going to have a big advantage. They're going to be heavy favorites coming in, no doubt about it. But it's still baseball. So, not awarding them anything yet, but yeah, that spending's out of control right now. As is that roster. Anyway, gang, I think that's about it for me. Check out rotoscouts.com. My point was before, all access to all of that stuff, under $1 a day for all of it. No per sport nonsense. Keep your money in your bankroll where it belongs. Give you the friendliest pricing in the industry. Weekly, monthly, and quarterly plans available. Every one of them is under $1 a day on a sliding scale. You commit to the monthly, the quarterly, you get a little bit more friendly of a price. But again, in a world where the price of groceries is going up, not down, eggs have doubled in price, bird flu's wiping out all our chickens, your DFS is still going to be inexpensive. You could tell the wife, go buy eggs. I'm saving us money on DFS. EB saying not to mention they're old and it'll catch up this year. They're not a young team. You definitely have that. Even Ohtani's not young. And especially if he's going to go back to pitching, who knows what impact that's going to have on him. So it's going to be a fun year either way. I'm just can't wait for baseball season. By far my favorite. Can't wait. Been itching for responses to some of my trade ideas in the Dynasty League. I've already gotten 2 deals done, but I got more irons in the fire. I'll keep you guys posted. One of the articles that I want to put together is just like this is our crazy league kind of a thing, and just like do a little feature about all of our absurd rules and everything, give you guys an idea. I've talked about it a lot, but I've never really put the rules doc out there or talked about it to that degree. Anyway, good luck out there tonight, gang. At the outside, we'll see you again on Monday, covering everything through the weekend between now and then. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Somebody go win multiple things. Or multiple people go win multiple things. Or multiple people go win one thing each. However you guys want to divvy it up. But go win stuff. Let me know when you do. I love seeing those screenshots come through. Really brightens my day. So good luck out there. We'll see you again soon. Later, gang.